Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। माधव गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, जय राधा कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, कुंज बिहारी जन गिरिवरधारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, वनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, राधा माधव गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी, यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन, यमुना तीरवनचारी, यशोदानंदन यमुना तीरवनचारी। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hey Krishna. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, chapter entitled The First Step in God Realization. So today we will be discussing text 18, which is on the board. So I will recite. Niyachhed vishayebhyo akshan manasa buddhi sarthi manah karmebhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayedhiya niyached vishayobhyo kshan manasa buddhi sarthi manah karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayadhiya niyached vishayobhyakshan manasa buddhi sarthi manah karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayadhiya karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayadhiya. Manasa buddhir sarati mana karma bhi asiktam shubharthe dharayadhiya niyached vishayabhyakshan manasa buddhi sarthi manah karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayadhiya. Matajis, Nishayabhyakshan manah karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayedhiya. So we will read the word-to-word meaning and then translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So word by word meaning, you can repeat. Niyached, withdraw. Vishyebhyah, from sense engagements. Akshan, the senses. Manasa, by the dint of the mind. Buddhi, intelligence. Sarthi, driver. Manasaha, the mind. Karmabhi, by the fruitive work. Akshiptam, being absorbed in. Shubh arthe, for the sake of the Lord. Dharayet, hold up. Dhiya, in full consciousness. So, translation. Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from the sense activities, and by intelligence, the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. Purport. The first process of spiritualizing the mind by mechanical chanting of the pranava, Omkar, and by control of the breathing system is technically called the mystic or yogic process of pranayama, or fully controlling the breathing air. The ultimate state of this pranayam system is to be fixed in trance, technically called samadhi. But experience has proven that even the samadhi stage also fails to control the materially absorbed mind. For example, the great mystic Vishwamitra Muni, even in the stage of samadhi, became a victim of the senses and cohabited with Menaka. History has already recorded this. The mind, although ceasing to think of sensual activities at present, remembers post sensual activities from the subconscious status and thus disturbs one from sent percement engagement in self-realization. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami recommends the next step of assured policy, namely to fix one's mind in the service of the personality of Godhead. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also recommends this direct process in the Bhagavad Gita 6.47. Thus, the mind being spiritually cleansed, one should at once engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord by different devotional activities of hearing, chanting, etc. If performed under proper guidance, that is the surest path of progress even for the disturbed mind. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Arupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guroho Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam Panghum langayate girim Yad kripa tamaham vande Shri Guru Dinatharinam. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to welcome everyone for this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are discussing from Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 18. So I will read the translation again. Niyached vishebhyo akshan manasa buddhi sartihi manha karmabhir akshiptam shubharthe dharayet diya. So the translation is, gradually as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdrawn from sense activities, and by intelligence the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. So in this beautiful section of Srimad Bhagavatam, we are discussing in this last few verses and the next two verses the process of Ashtanga Yoga as mentioned here by Srila Shukadeva Goswami. And yesterday very beautifully we heard from Nanda Dulal Prabhu. He spoke about the importance of pranayam and the pranav, the glories of Omkar. And so now in this verse, so it's like basically yama, the previous two verses to yesterday's, were yam, niyam, pranayam. And so today it's pratyahara and dharana. And then the next two verses will be dhyana and samadhi. And very beautifully, Srila Prabhupada in this purport explains how we can actually practically apply this message. Or as we read in the Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, where there is the concept of how to we control the mind is described elaborately, and the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Srila Prabhupada in the purports very beautifully explains that how it is very, very difficult in this age and time to go out in a forest and be in a secluded place and sit in an asana and withdraw the senses and perform the dhyana. And there in the 6th chapter, purport to the text 33, Prabhupada explains where Arjuna expresses his inability to perform. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that it is not possible for an ordinary man to leave home, go to a secluded place or to jungle to practice yoga in this age. Prabhupada explains that the present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. So we need not explain this. Everyone has an experience of the struggles of living in this present age. And then Prabhupada explains further in that purport, 6.33, that people are not serious about self-realization. Even by simple practical means, what to speak of difficult yoga path, yoga system. And so as a practical man, therefore, Arjuna thought it was impossible to follow this system of yoga. And then when Arjuna explained the difficulty of controlling the mind, because this verse is talking about how one should bring back the mind away from the senses. Niyached, withdraw, vishebhyo is the sense objects, and akshan means senses, or it can mean eyes, but here it is in the broader sense. Akshan means all the senses. So the verse is saying niyached vishayobhi akshan, arthat bring back the mind from the different sense objects. So bring back the sense objects from the vishayan. So and then when Arjuna was proposed in the Gita, then Arjuna explains, my dear Lord, it's not easy. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. My dear Krishna, the mind is really very, very flickering. It's pramati, it is balvat, it's obstinate, it is very, very strong. Tasyaham nigraham manye. Therefore, to control it is like vayur iva sudushkritam, like controlling the wind. We cannot control the wind. It's not possible to control the wind. So when in that purpose also Srila Prabhupada explains that there are so many challenges living in this practical world. It is very, very difficult to control the mind. And then Prabhupada gives the classic analogy from the Katha Upanishad of the chariot. We will come to which is explained here in this verse also. Manasa Buddhi Sarathi. So Buddhi Sarathi, the Katha Upanishad verse gives this it's a very famous verse, but what a very classic and a clear understanding of the body, mind, intelligence, and the soul this verse describes. This verse describes like a chariot. Of course, nowadays people probably, the younger generation may know what a chariot or rath looks like. Basically, there are horses, there are those reins, then there is a charioteer and the driver. So then the analogy explains that the horses are like the senses which are wild, which are wanting to go in different directions, but they are controlled by the reins, which is the mind, and the sarathi or the driver is the intelligence, and the passenger is us, the soul. And Prabhupada, so therefore the mind has to be controlled with intelligence, which should be based on scriptures. But in the purport, Prabhupada explains that the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. The function of the intelligence is to discriminate what is right, what is wrong. But the mind is so powerful that sometimes we know what is the right thing, what is not right. The power of the obstinate mind is so strong that even though we know, still we are swayed to do that which we are not supposed to. And Prabhupada gives an analogy like an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. So if there is a very acute infection, so even though one may take the medicines, one may have the intelligence, but still it is not capable to act. So then, Prabhupada in that purport explains the easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, this verse which we are discussing, Nishyached Vishyobhi Akshan, Manasa Buddhi Sarthi. So how is that possible? As Prabhupada explained, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance, in all humility. So this is the method which is suggested to control the mind in this age of Kali, is chanting the Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance. As wonderfully Nanda Dulal explained that the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the Parak mantra, gives prema, not just control the mind, but it gives love. In all humanity. This method is prescribed. And then, of course, Prabhupada gives the example of the life of Maharaj Ambarish, who was a great saintly king. And Prabhupada explains how he was always engaging his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the temple, his ears in hearing words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, Krishna's places of worship like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engages in senses of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotee, engaging the sense of smell in smelling the fragrances of Tulsi, and engaging his tongue in tasting Krishna's prasadam. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places. and head in bowing down before the Lord. All his desires is serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambrish never desired anything for his own sense gratification. And Prabhupada concludes that purport by saying, he engaged all senses in devotional service in various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and completely free from all material desires. In one sense, what is remaining? Sab kuch to use kar liya Bhagavan ki seva. Therefore, so this is the positive way of conquering the mind or controlling the mind, is by engaging everything, all the faculties of senses which we have in service of the Lord. So this is the process which is being spoken here as Prabhupada explains in the purport. Manasa buddhi sarthi, that withdraw the senses from the sense objects, but simply withdrawing will not work. So then, using those same senses 24 hours a day, engaging in Krishna's service. Only then there will remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. So sounds so easy to speak, but it's not easy what Ambarish Maharaj was doing. Maybe he didn't have a smartphone to distract him. But so this is what is being recommended here, that when there is, all the senses are engaged, then there will be no other engagements to agitate the mind. तो बंद बचा ही क्या, सब कुछ तो भगवान की सेवा में लगा दिया अम्बरीश महाराज. And that is the process, but that is the process. And of course, in that section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna does accept that, my dear Arjun, what you're saying, asamshyam mahabaho manah durnigraham chalam. It is not easy to control the mind, my dear Arjun, not to engage them, to withdraw the mind from the sense objects which are so powerful, so attractive. And in this, specifically in this age of Kali, so our strength of the mind is becoming weak. Our intelligence is growing weak. The artificial intelligence is increasing, but the natural human intelligence, guided by the scriptures and the holy words of the acharyas, is growing weaker. And the mind is getting more chanchal and powerful. And the sense objects are getting more and more attractive with the time is passing. So Krishna is accepting, my dear Arjun, it is actually difficult. And the way, as Prabhupada explains, or Bhagavad Gita explains, is abhyasen tu kaunte vairagyan. So by abhyas and vairagya, both are needed. And then Prabhupada explains, what is this practice? As in the previous purport, Prabhupada explains, the practice of Krishna consciousness, the engaging the senses in the 9 processes, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vandanam, Sakhyam, Dasyam, Atmanivedanam. So when one engages the senses in all these 9 processes of devotional service, then it is possible. And Prabhupada, of course, emphasized in that purport that hearing about Krishna, the first and the foremost of such devotional practice is Shravanam, is hearing. This is powerful method. And Prabhupada, very beautiful line he writes, that hearing is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. Purging the mind of all misgivings. So whatever the mind is like a reservoir which keeps accumulating whatever we acquire from our different senses, from our eyes, from ears, from nose, from tongue. It's all repository is made in the mind. So mind is like a sort of a hard disk which has data of all our past lives, all that we have done. And Prabhupada explains that the hearing is such a transcendental method for purging the mind. All the purging is eliminating the mind of all the misgivings which are there in our mind. And then Prabhupada explains, and by detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can easily learn Vairagya. So basically, Vairagya means detachment for the mind and engaging the mind in service. So that is the secret which Prabhupada gives. Continues with that analogy of the infectious disease. It is like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. So Prabhupada said that the hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Sri Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, which we are all living with, the mad mind. And eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the diet. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada very simply put the process of controlling or purging the mind of all the misgiving is hearing about the Supreme Lord, beginning with hearing about the Supreme Lord and honoring Krishna's prasad. So that's the simple process which is recommended in this age of Kali. And then in the purport, also Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Srila Vishwamitra Muni. Prabhupada explains that even though somebody who has achieved samadhi in the process which Vishwamitra Muni followed, the mystic yoga process, even in that stage of samadhi, one can become a victim of the senses. And Prabhupada gives the example how Vishwamitra Muni was enamored by Menaka and he cohabited with Menaka. Prabhupada said, history has already recorded this. And then a very beautiful, important point which is mentioned here is, the mind, although ceasing to think of sensual activities at present, so at present one may be not thinking of sensual activities, the mind, although ceasing to think of sensual activities at present, remembers past sensual activities from the subconscious status and thus disturbs one from cent% engagement. So even though Vishwamitra Muni, as Prabhupada explained in this purport, may not be thinking about engagement in sense gratification at the time of full absorption in the mystic yogic process, but still the mind has the repository of all the sense gratificatory activities which we have done, not in this life, but millions of previous lives which we have done. So billions of gigabytes of data of all our past activities is actually reposited there. It's actually stored there. There is no insufficient data in that. So that all that data in a favorable environment to that can actually pop up and again catch the person or trap the person, as is the example of Srila Vishwamitra Muni given here. He was completely absorbed, engaged in senses, but the previous samskaras which were there in the subconscious strata and a favorable situation, environment was prepared, and then there was this challenge experience. So therefore, we, each one of us, have to be very, very careful about what samskaras or what impressions we put in our mind through our senses, through our eyes, through our ears, through our tongue, to all our senses, what experience we deposit inside. It may sometime appear to us that what we are seeing, nobody is seeing what I am seeing, nobody is hearing what I am hearing. It is not going to make any, and I am strong enough, powerful enough, I have a strong mind now, I can manage it. But as it is explained, that these impressions are so deep-rooted in our subconscious strata that at the time of challenging situations, when we are alone, just by with our mind and the environment is conducive, these messages, these impressions, these samskaras stored in our subconscious strata, as Prabhupada explains here, can come back and disturb us. So therefore, and Prabhupada explains in the purport from Bhagavad Gita 9.2 that only by the process of devotional service, these deep-rooted samskaras also can be removed. Prabhupada explains that, quoting that verse, the famous verse from Padma Puran, Aprarabdha phalam papam kutam bijam falonmukham kramaneva praliyate Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. And which translates as, there are different stages of dormant reactions to sinful activities which we do. There are different reactions. And there are different stages to dormant reactions to sinful activities to be observed in a sinful life. Sinful reactions may be just waiting to take effect, like the falonmukh, which is just about to come. Some reactions or impressions which may be further dormant, like the kuta, or the bij, where like the seed form. In any case, all types of, this verse explains, all types of sinful reactions are vanquished one after another if a person engages in devotional service of Lord Vishnu. So therefore, this is the process which can actually uproot the deepest samskaras which we have accumulated over millions of years. This is what this is explained in this section. And Prabhupada, in a purport while explaining this verse, he explains that as in the medical field, for precaution's sakes, doctors inject vaccination. Of course, it is a debatable thing, but for the understanding of this verse, doctor injects a vaccination to prevent the growing of contamination. The contamination is all around. All the viruses and the bacteria are all around in the environment. But we receive vaccination to prevent the growing of contamination within our body. Similarly, Prabhupada explains the practical injection to stop all fructifications of the seeds of our sinful activities or proclivities is simply engagement in Krishna consciousness. So this is like our vaccination from immunity, from Maya, from material energy, which is all pervading in this age of Kali. So this is the vaccination of engagement in Krishna consciousness. So we all, each one of us, have to endeavor in our lives to be completely engaged in Krishna's service. Then only it is possible to remain not infected by the contamination which is surrounding this world. And Prabhupada concludes this purport by saying, if the mind being spiritually cleansed, one should at once engage himself in transcendental loving service of the Lord by different devotional activities of hearing, chanting. If performed under proper guidance, that is the surest path of progress, even for the disturbed mind. Even for the disturbed mind, under the guidance, engaging in hearing and chanting is the surest path of progress and success. So now, we will see an example actually from the life of Srila Vishwamitra Muni himself. Prabhupada has quoted Srila Vishwamitra Muni in this purport. And now we'll see how this episode which Prabhupada is quoting here about Menaka was before. So now this episode which we are discussing is how Vishwamitra Muni himself came to the conclusion that devotional service is supreme and has the power to completely satisfy the self. So this is the beautiful episode from Sri Ramayana of Balkand, which describes the growth of Srila Vishwamitra Muni's journey. Of course, as we know that not many pastimes of Lord Ram in his childhood are mentioned. A very few are mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana. Few other acharyas have commented, but very few. So one of the episodes which we begin is, this is in the ashram of Vashishta Muni, where all the four brothers were getting trained. So one of the times, this is very few, one of the incidents which is mentioned of Lord Ram having fun of course, the purpose of Lord Ram incarnation is to teach us the moral values and the spiritual values. So therefore, not much emphasis on his childhood activities are there. But this is one of the interesting episodes where Vasishthaji is teaching archery to the four brothers, and somehow one of the classes Vasishthaji had to go and attend to some of his duties. And Lord Ram and Lakshman were there, and they wanted to test how much they have learned. So practical test. So some lady happened to pass by in their firing range, in their range where they were practicing archery. And so Lord Ram pointed to Lakshmanji, and that lady had a very big nose ring. So Lord Ram hinted to Lakshmanji, what do you want to try? Somehow Lakshmanji had that fascination with nose, Surupna Kavi Nak, and this here again nose. But this was different. So then Lakshmanji understood. So he took a arrow, shot at that lady and her nose ring. As soon as the arrow touched the nose ring, there immersed a liquid which was there, and it contracted the nose ring. And it was just contracted a little too much, and it was a little becoming difficult for her to breathe. So Lord Ram understood. Lord Ram is, of course, the two brothers are the most compassionate, so they couldn't see. So Lord Ram shot another arrow and just expanded the ring so that back to its original shape, so that she is peaceful. And then she was looking around, how is that happened here? Mera nose ring chota ho gaya, and then again bada ho gaya. It was like a shock to her. And then she realized these two boys are there, and she was captivated by their beauty, but she was wondering, how is that possible? How can somebody do that? And then she had a little doubt, and Lord Ram said that, okay, we'll show you how it's possible. Lakshmanji shot another arrow which broke the nose ring and actually flew in the air. And then Lord Ram, and she was yelling, what is this happening? And Lord Ram threw another arrow in such a way that he actually hit that nose ring and put it back on her nose. In all these four arrows, not even once the arrow touched the lady's nose. So that was the expertise which these brothers were experiencing. And that was in Vasishthaji's school. Of course, now coming to the episode which we want to discuss, which is relevant for the subject matter we are discussing. This is in the courtroom of Maharaj Dashrath. And Dashrathji is now having a meeting with all his ministers to organize or plan the wedding of Ram and all the brothers. So he has called for his ministers to find out the best shadi.com options for them. And as soon as that discussion is happening, there was a whole commotion, and one of the guards actually ran in. He was like very disheveled, and he was as if he was being chased by some mad dog. And Dashrathji realized the situation, that this is something needs immediate attention. So he actually rose from his throne to calm the guard at what is the situation. And then this guard was like rumbling, and that there was a great sage who has come, and I somehow tried to stop him, but he was just pushing and right somehow entering inside. I could not hold him. Please forgive me. And the guard was, please tell us how to deal with this. And then, of course, Dashrathji asked, what is the name of the sage? And he said, Vishwamitra Muni. And of course, when Dashrathji and all the ministers, they heard the word Vishwamitra Muni, they actually rose from their seats that out of respect. So the guard didn't know who Vishwamitra Muni is. But all the sages who were there and the ministers and Dashrathji had heard about the glorious tapasya and his tej, Brahma tej of Vishwamitra Muni. So they received him with a warm welcome, and Dashrathji personally goes in to welcome him, and a beautiful reception was organized as just to a saintly personality like Sri Vishwamitra Ji. And then, of course, Vishwamitra Muni asked various questions, and Dashrathji answered them and ushered him to his palace. And Dashrathji, with his profuse words, glorifies Vishwamitra Ji that your presence has just brought, it's like nectar shower upon us. It is like suddenly rains have come after so many years of drought, or if somebody has lost his treasure and again regains it back, or it's like fathering a son after so many years. So like that, various glorification of Sri Vishwamitra Muni is done by Dashrathji. He glorifies him, makes him comfortable, peaceful, and then Dashrathji understand that there must be a purpose to such a saintly person's visit. So he inquires, my dear sage, you have come to our ashram, to our palace. How may I serve you? Please tell us. And I promise that I will fulfill whatever it's possible for me to do. And so Vishwamitra Muni knew that Ayodhya is the place where even the demigods had come. Indra had come when they had to fight with Shambharasur to seek help from Dashrathji, and all the sages from all over the world would actually travel to Ayodhya. They knew this is one place where we will get whatever we ask for. So Vishwamitra Muni had come with that confidence, and he also thanked him for the wonderful reception and asked him, reminded him of that your duty that you have promised, and then he asked for that I need your son Ram to take to the forest where I'm going to complete my yajna, and which was like a thunderbolt on the head and heart of Dashrathji. And a beautiful long conversation happened where Dashrathji is giving various arguments. First was an emotional outburst. He's crying, he's not able to fathom. Then he gathers himself, thinks logically what is Vishwamitra Muni is asking for is protection from the Rakshasas. So then he proposes, let me come with my whole army. Vishwamitra Muni is not in a mood to listen. He's fixed on what he wants. He knows now what he wants. And then, of course, he says that, okay, let Ram come. I'll come with all my armies also. Vishwamitra Muni was clear. He wanted an exclusive association of Ram. So he didn't want any armies or Dashrathji, and Dashrathji may not be able to understand the way they reciprocate. So there's a whole elaborate discussion happened where Vishwamitra Muni is really, really fierily angry. And of course, Dashrathji had heard about the anger of Vishwamitra Muni, and Dashrathji was trying to give various arguments that Lord Ram is just 12 and the official age for fighting is 16, recruitment in the army is 16, and so they are not eligible even for the new schemes, but so please, they are just 12 and they are very young and they just sleep early in the evening. So these Rakshasas are like the Nishachara, they are awake in the night. That's how it would be previously. The Nishacharas would be, and the most people would sleep early at the night. And all these arguments, but Vishwamitra Muni was fixed with his strong desire to get the association of Ram. And finally, Vishishtaji had to intervene and do the mediation, the classic mediation, where Vishwamitra Muni Vishishtaji knew Vishwamitraji's qualities and his powers and his strength, and he elaborately explains, my dear Dashrath, do not worry. He has so many powerful missiles and so many blessings that he himself is empowered to actually take care of all these Rakshasas which he's talking about. It's just he wants Ram to come and assist because he has taken a vow for this sacrifice. He will not become angry or lift any weapon. So do not worry. It will be an opportunity for Ram to grow. So this is how finally when Guru convinces Vishwamitra Muni, Dashrathji finally agrees and calls for Lord Ram, and Mother Kaushalya also gives blessings. He embraces Ram, kisses on his head, and Lord Ram had such faith and conviction in the affection and his care and trust in Dashrathji's intelligence that Lord Ram never even questioned, what is this, where am I going, why am I going? So I have been asked by my father, okay, he had that faith in his father's love and intelligence that whatever father decides for me, and Dashrathji was qualified because he had the guidance of all his ministers and everything. And finally, Lord Ram goes ahead with Vishwamitra Muni. And now comes a beautiful section which we want to focus on. And so while they were walking on the way, and Lord Ram and Lakshman were walking behind Sri Vishwamitra Muni and walking through different various trains and forests and others, and Vishwamitra Muni, like a loving father, and first time his motherly emotions were erupting, seeing Ram and Lakshman, and he would explain about different places and tell about the elaborate stories of the different places, everything about each city, about town, every river, what was happening. And then when they reached on the banks of Saryu, that is when Lord Sri Vishwamitra Muni told Ram that now I am going to empower you with two powerful mantras, which is Bal and Atibal. Having received these powerful mantras and siddhis, you will not experience any fatigue. You will become most powerful, undefeatable. And Lord Ram very humbly goes to take bath in Saryu River, comes back, and Vishwamitraji offered this service to Sri Ram. So this is now the contrast to what Vishwamitra Muni had been doing over the years and years and years of severe tapasya. But now he is the first time rendering personal service with all his senses and mind to Sri Ram and Sri Lakshmanji. And as Lord Ram and Lakshman, of course, Ramji gave those mantras to Lakshmanji, Vishwamitra understanding the subtleties that Lakshmanji did not want to be known as in the same platform. Therefore, Vishwamitra Muni initiated Ram in those mantras, and Ramji in turn initiated Lakshmanji. So very subtly, Vishwamitra Muni, very careful, very thoughtful, does this most beautiful service to Sri Ram and Sri Lakshmanji, and is absorbed in just seeing their beautiful forms, as it is explained here in this beautiful verse, the dharana. And in the Shubh Arthe Dharyet Dhiya, that Shubh Arthe is also translated by some acharyas as meditating on the form of the Lord. That is what actually in Ashtanga Yoga dharana is, meditating on the form of the Lord. And this is what Vishwamitra Muni got, the personal darshan of Sri Ram, Sri Lakshman, opportunity to serve them. And I'll just conclude with this. The first night which Sri Vishwamitra Muni spends with Sri Ram and Lakshman on the bank of Saryu. Lord Ram and Lakshman have never stepped out of the kingdom in a forest. This was their first night to sleep on a forest or the carpet of grass. Of course, such was the training that they were very easily adaptable. That's how we should all be trained in all circumstances we can adopt. And then when Lord Lakshman was put to rest, Vishwamitra Muni was nearby, just singing to them and chanting different prayers and telling different stories like Kaushalya would do, sort of a lullabies and loris he would there, and then put them to bed. So here is the seeds of devotion in the heart of Vishwamitra Muni erupting. And then in the morning when Vishwamitra Muni goes after doing his early morning duties, he goes to wake up Sri Ram and Sri Lakshmanji just by seeing the transcendental beauty of the sleeping lords. This is the beauty of the Lord in all circumstances. It is unaffected by time or any condition or any circumstances. None of us are beautiful while we are sleeping. But here is a great sage, Vishwamitra Muni, heart being softened after rendering service, personal service to Ram and Lakshman, is come here to wake up Ram and Lakshman. And he's so captivated and enamored by the beauty of Sri Ram and Lakshman, and remembering the fortune which Kaushalya Mai has received to see these beautiful forms of Ram and Lakshman, to wake them up. He's just chanting these beautiful prayers. Kaushalya, Kaushalya, Kaushalya. He's just remembering the mother Kaushalya's great fortune of seeing. And then he, of course, says that the beautiful verse, which most famous verse, Kaushalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate Uttishta Narshardul Kartavyam Devimanukam. How fortunate is Kaushalya, who has begotten you as her son. The sun has risen in the east. Now you, my dear Lord, tiger among the men, please rise and perform those duties that are considered divine. But for a long time he was just chanting Kaushalya, Kaushalya, Kaushalya. So this is the journey of Vishwamitra Muni to the spiritual perfection which is described in this verse by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada quotes, as we discussed earlier, that the episode of Menaka, where Vishwamitra Muni was trying to somehow, through mystic yoga process, control the mind, but the past samskaras made it difficult. But now in this episode we see completely engaging his mind and senses in serving the Supreme Lord and Sri Lakshmanji. He received a state of highest bliss, which he himself admits that all my thousands and years and lakhs of years of tapasya, I never experienced such transcendental happiness which I am experiencing today by seeing these sleeping lords. So this transcendental experience or happiness is awaiting each one of us if we can follow what Srila Prabhupada is saying in the process of hearing and chanting under proper guidance. That is the surest path of progress even for the disturbed mind. Hare Krishna. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.
Last moment. Yeah.